Friends, we've come together today to give kavod achron, to give the final dignity and respect to our rabbi and teacher, Avimori Morenu Harav Menachem Fishel, Ben Aaron Halevi V'Sara Rivka, Rabbi Morton Menachem Yolkut. We share in the pain of my mother, his partner, and best friend for 40 years, and a selfless caregiver for the last 7 months. The pain of his brother, my Uncle Myron, and Aunt Rana, of my brother David, of his daughters-in-law, Anna and Rachel, and of his precious legacy, his 8 grandchildren, Chana, Sarah, Chaski, Ayelet, Meira, Sarah, Rivka, Yehuda, Ricky, and Yaakov Dov. Of his mother-in-law, my revered grandmother, Margaret Schlesinger, of his brothers and sisters-in-law, of his many beloved cousins, and all of you who were touched by my father's life, my father's character, and my father's teaching. We'll begin with the recitation of Tehillim Parak Aleph, the first chapter of Psalms, by our cousin, Dr. Abe Cherrick.
Asherei Hoish Asher lo alach batzas rishoim Uvederech hatoim lo amod Uvamoshav leitzim lo yashov Kim besoras Adonai chefzo Uvesoraso yege yomam v'layla v'yaya ki etshos wol al falge moyim asher piryo yiten vito v'yaleo lo yibol v'chol asher Yaseh Yatzliach Lochein Oresh Havayim Ki im kamot asher tidfenu ruach Ahalekein Lo yakumu reshoim b'mishpat V'chatoyim B'yada sadikim Ki yodea Adonai derech tzadikim v'derech rishoyim toveh.
The Torah gives us specific dictates of how to live every moment of our lives. And our moments of pain are no exception from those. The mitzvah which is incumbent upon us today is the mitzvah of Hesped, of eulogizing. Well, that when a person leaves this world, it is incumbent on the family and on the community to develop a sense of appreciation of just who was lost, to touch the heart and perhaps to shatter the heart. We have a number of family members who each in their own way will help create the picture of my father to touch those of you who took the time today to assemble for this purpose. I'd like to ask first my brother David to come and share Divrei Hesped. Zachor Yemos Olam, Binu Shnos Dor Vador, She'al Avicha V'Yagedcha, Skeinecha V'Yomrulach. Remember the days of old, consider the years of each generation. Ask your father, and he will inform you, your elders, and they will tell you. This pasuk, this verse, was not just my father's personal favorite. It truly sums up everything that he stood for and everything that he tried to teach us. She'al avicha v'yagedcha, ask your father and he will inform you. The terribly sad reality is not lost on me that at this moment we need my dad more than ever. He was the maspid par excellence, the eloquent and masterful eulogizer. He was the one who rose on occasions, both joyous and sorrowful, to offer his own unique perspective on the day's events rooted in my family's history. As the eldest of his generation of Cherrick and Yolkut cousins, he took it upon himself to frame these special moments in time with speeches that betrayed a deep and abiding respect and even reverence for the past and for those individuals in his life that shaped who he was. Through these speeches, which were not always short, but were always heartfelt, my dad imparted to me, my brother, and those closest to his heart our family's rich legacy, and taught us to understand the Shnos Dor Vador, to live up to the ideals of the generations that came before us. It's therefore with humility and sadness that I offer these words to remember Avi Mori Harav, Menachem ben Aaron Alevi Zechrono Livracha, my father, my teacher, Rabbi Morden Yolkut of blessed memory. Avi Mori Harav. It's these three elements of my dad's life as rabbi, as teacher, and of course as just my dad that I want to address today. My dad's career as a spiritual congregational rabbi, a spiritual leader, was born, as many in my family will recall the story, of a courageous decision that his parents, together with my great uncle Bill, made in the 1950s to send a 13-year-old shy boy hundreds of miles away from his home in St. Louis to pursue a higher Torah education in Chicago. And after years of study at the Skokie Yeshiva with some of the greatest Torah personalities of the 20th century, where he forged friendships and memories that lasted a lifetime, my dad became a pulpit rabbi, a career which really came to define him for over 35 years. He was beloved by his many, many hundreds of congregants in Anshe Knesset Israel on the south side of Chicago, and then most memorable for me for almost 3 decades in B'nai David in Southfield, Michigan, and then for 13 years here in Philadelphia at Shari Shemayim Beth Judah. My father particularly loved and was loved by the most senior congregants of his shuls. He would often tell me how humbled he was as a relatively young single rabbi to be accorded such respect and deference, and how grateful he was to be taken in every Shabbos. One story that still amazes me today really captures the love that my dad's congregants had for him. On a Rosh Hashanah morning, back in the early 1980s,
speaking to a capacity crowd in the magnificent B'nai David Sanctuary in Detroit, my dad spoke of a wish, of a vision, to see the synagogue just as packed on a quote-unquote regular Shabbos morning, where there was no bar mitzvah, no family simchas. And it was probably, I think he even admitted this later on, a throwaway line, a pipe dream that he never really thought would ever be fulfilled. But a grassroots campaign was launched by the shul membership without the benefit of listservs or email blasts. And on a dreary, cold Michigan morning in February, my dad came to shul to see a full house waiting for him. It was an amazing tribute, and one that at the time was covered by several national Jewish publications. So while my father never sought out kavod or honor, I was so proud to be known as the rabbi's son. It's not every kid that had the opportunity and fortune to watch their parent at work, but I had a front row seat every Shabbos. He was, first and foremost, a terrifically talented orator, an engaging and dynamic public speaker. His Yizkor speeches in particular made a lasting impression. During those powerful moments when he had his congregants' full attentions and full hearts, he would beseech them not just to remember their loved ones, but to honor their memory by living purposeful, Jewishly oriented lives. The lesson he conveyed time and again was that the only way to properly honor the past was to make the present a more meaningful place. In addition to his brilliant speeches that attracted many fans and followers, my dad also excelled behind the scenes in those quiet moments that people don't often talk about when it comes to rating a rabbi, in counseling and consoling and adjudicating. He was a principled, steady, dignified leader, not afraid to stand his ground on the side of tradition and what he thought was right, even at the expense of his own popularity. And while he didn't seek the limelight, his accomplishments were rightly recognized, again, time and again, by Israel Bonds, by my old school in Detroit, Akiva Hebrew Day School, at the 100th anniversary of his shul, B'nai David. He was also chosen as one of a dozen rabbis to have a personal audience with President George W. Bush at the White House, and impressed someone enough to be invited back to participate in the inaugural celebrations in a tradition that dates back all the way to President Washington. Next, my father was also a talented and devoted teacher. I think it was actually somewhat overshadowed by other elements of his career, but my dad at heart really just loved to teach. He was the educational director at the Lincolnwood Synagogue in Chicago, a professor of religious studies at DePaul University in Chicago, and instituted a number of popular adult education classes in his particular areas of expertise: Jewish medical ethics, the history of the Holocaust, the great Jewish modern philosophers. And in his last few years, my dad found great joy and fulfillment in teaching continuing education at Temple University here in Philly. My mom recently told me, because it wasn't really my dad's way to talk about himself, that his were the only courses at Temple that were not just standing room only, but actually telecast to another classroom to accommodate the overflow crowd. And the outpouring of concern from the Temple students to my mom over these last few months was really remarkable and a real tribute to the impact that my dad had as a teacher. But more than anything else, I want to remember my dad as a devoting father, a loving husband, a caring son and son-in-law, a wise older brother to my Uncle Myron, and a real pushover of a grandpa. Many of my most cherished childhood memories are very basic: playing catch with my dad in the yard, boating on Lake Michigan in the summertime, dissecting one of my basketball games, spending long afternoons at some of the greatest historic ballparks: Tiger Stadium, Wrigley Field, Comiskey. For a long time, I had no idea that you could play baseball in a stadium that was created after 1920. We shared a love not just for the same sports teams, but even for the same players on those teams, those that put their heads down and didn't seek out the limelight and just worked hard. My dad, for example, and I'm going to get some knowing smiles, I think, from a few of you, often would extol the Midwestern values and virtues of Stan the Man Musial, his childhood memory, his childhood hero. Being called a Midwesterner to my dad was a compliment of the highest order. He also taught me, though, that there are more important things in life than sports. I remember him gently chiding me as a second grader for only talking sports at the table. And he reminded me that he knew a thing or two about things outside of baseball. And not wanting to disappoint him, I took that lesson to heart, and the next Friday night I came to the table armed with 5 questions about that week's Torah portion. And I'm pretty sure I went back to talking baseball after the soup. And as I grew up, we found ourselves more often than not seeing many of the biggest issues of the day completely eye to eye. But even more than that, we really just enjoyed schmoozing with each other about the latest in rabbinic politics, or an article, or an op-ed, or just talking about the latest political debate. He was also a loving husband. I was privileged to watch up close a love story between my mom and dad that was not just a partnership, but a bonding of 2 very different but perfectly complementary personalities. Just a word about my mom, because saying anything more than that will make me completely lose it. My mom's dedication and love to my father, not just over 38 years of marriage, but in particular during these last few very challenging months, has been superhuman. Words don't do justice to my mom's efforts to care for my dad tirelessly, tenderly, and selflessly on a 24/7 basis. There can only be a divine reward for her heroics. And while I was too young to appreciate the very special bond that my dad clearly had for my bubby, Sarah, I learned powerful lessons in Kibbutz Avim by watching my dad's relationship with his in-laws, my grandmother, Margot Schlesinger, and the Havda Mechayim Lachayim, my grandfather, Chaskel Schlesinger, Zichron Livracha. My dad, like my uncles, was a constant source of pride and nachas. And my dad would always speak in awe of my grandparents' harrowing experiences during the Holocaust, and in admiration of the quiet and dignified way that they rebuilt and lived their lives in France and in Chicago. Finally, my dad was a doting and even a hands-on grandpa to his 8 Einiklach, whom he spoiled rotten with trips to the candy store, weekends at Grandma and Grandpa's, and other special outings. Even during his latest health challenges, a visit from the grandkids was a very special moment, sure to draw a smile, even amidst unbearable pain. The Mishnah tells us, Ben Shivim L'Seva, that at 70 years, you have reached a ripe old age. And perhaps that's true. But I can't help but wish that my dad, who just turned 70 last month, could have had more time with us to share his thoughts at Chana and Sarah's bat mitzvahs,